Hello everyone, I welcome you all to DFI India Groundwork Webinar 5. There are few instructions before we move to the webinar. Recording of this webinar is prohibited and certificates will be prepared and emailed in approximately 2 weeks. Online webinar recording will be emailed in approximately 2 weeks. Here are a few control panel details. In order to view clear screen and to hide control panel, please press this tab, which is showing with a red orange arrow button. And if you want to see the webinar in full screen mode, you may click on this third tab. And I ask participants to please enter your questions here anytime during the discussion along with your name and organization name. Here are a few handouts for the webinar. You can download these handouts during any time during the presentation. As we go, I would like to introduce myself being the session moderator of this webinar. My name is Roji. I'm a research scholar at IIT Hyderabad. I have worked as assistant professor in an engineering college in Kerala for 4 years. I have done my master's from IIT Hyderabad, and I'm currently working on developing numerical models for geosynthetic reinforced pavements, and I am an awardee of Shastri Indo-Canadian Research Fellowship. If you too want to be a student volunteer to DFI India, reach out us using this link. On behalf of DFI India, I welcome today's main speaker and all the participants to this webinar. I welcome main speakers, Mr. N. Ramakrishna Raju and Ms. Srilakshmi Nagarajan to this event. For this webinar, we have two sessions. One is a technical presentation and another one is a professional development session. Technical session will be handled by Mr. N. Ramakrishna Raju on ground improvement for railway embankments on soft marine clay and expansive soils. And the session will be followed with a Q&A. And next session, which is an interesting, this is on professional development session, will be handled by Ms. Srilakshmi Nagarajan on mentorship with intention and purpose. And this session is also followed by a Q&A session. When I talk about DFI India groundwork, I would say this event is part of a student outreach program groundwork, which is announced by DFI India during DFI India's 2020 annual conference in November 2020. And the program is aimed to lay the foundation for the next generation foundation engineers by supplementing academic coursework with practical design and construction and few other topics. And this program enhances professional development and interpersonal growth, and also highlights various project roles in the foundation industry. And this project, this groundwork webinars, we have few activities for this outreach program, like monthly webinars and interaction with industry leaders and interesting competitions and free DFI membership and access to onemind.org. And this DFI India groundwork has a committee which is comprised of Professor Amit Prashant from IIT Gandhinagar, Professor A. Bhuminath from IIT Madras, and Professor B. Umashankar from IIT Hyderabad, and more members from industry and academia will be inducted soon. So let us begin the technical session. So the topic of this session is ground improvement for railway embankments on soft marine clay and expansive soils, and on this few case studies. This session will be handled by Mr. N. Ramakrishna Raju, Vice President and Head of Engineering, Tata Projects Limited, Hyderabad. He is leading team of 150 design engineers and supporting engineering requirements and he has a lot of expertise in the field of design of steel plants, power plants, high-rise buildings, hydropower structures, highways, railways, and few many. And he has a very good knowledge in geotechnical engineering and construction methodology. He has more than 30 years of experience and has worked in reputed organizations like L&T and NCC before joining Tata Projects in 2015. Now I welcome Mr. N. Ramakrishna Raju for the session.
Yeah, good afternoon to all. So today I am going to talk on the topic ground improvement for railway embankments on soft marine clay and expansive soils. Two case studies we are going to briefly discuss. So these projects, what I am going to talk today is for the dedicated freight corridor for Indian Railways. This is exclusively for So these projects are exclusively for carrying the goods. No passenger is allowed on these tracks. One line is connected from Bombay to Delhi, that is called Western Corridor, and Delhi to Calcutta, it is called Eastern Corridor. So we are part of this total development. Around 40 to 50% of work is done by Tata Projects, and the rest of the work is done by Larsen & Toubro and part of work by GMR. So what is as this track is laid in thousands of kilometers, we are going to handle the difficult stretches of the marine clays, soft soils, and also expansive soils in Gujarat and etc. So I'm going to give you briefly about the two case studies. One is on how to handle the railway embankments on soft marine clay, how the loading will be transferred to the clay, what sort of improvements required. The second case is how to handle an expansive soil. The soil is very hard during the summer, and the rainy season it becomes soft and start giving the expansiveness. How to handle that clay. So one project where we are working presently is on the DFCCI project in Mumbai area, connecting from JNPT to Baroda, those three stretches. So this is around 104 kilometers of the stretch where this red line shows the railway track moving on the ground. So the entire area Mumbai, the general soil profile consists of very soft marine clay followed by the basalt rock. So how now the embankment heights, what we are talking here is varying from 2 to 10 meters. The load coming from the embankment is around 5 to 15 ton per meter square, whereas the ground strength is not more than 2 to 5 ton per meter square or 50 kilopascals. So we found out what are the different methods of ground improvement available for us to handle the soft clay. Ground improvement without admixtures, ground improvement with inclusions, ground improvement with grouts and chemical admixtures. As you are aware that all this without admixtures means either it will be replacement because we don't add any other components inside the ground, preloading with PVDs, vacuum consolidation. Ground improvement with inclusions means we add this additional material into the clay, thereby improve the shear strength and reduce the settlement. That is the stone columns, sand compaction piles, soil nailing and geosynthetics. Ground improvement with grouts and chemical admixtures, which now of late we are getting these technologies in India, chemical stabilization, deep mixing, jet grouting, etc. So what is the method we adopted in marine clay? If the soil layer thickness is less than 2 meters, we have removed that soft clay layer and replaced with the good SQ1 material, that is a granular material. If the depth of clay layer is more than 2 meters, and this one of the problem here is our railway line of the DFCCI, that is dedicated freight corridor track, will run parallel to the existing Indian railway line. So the distance between the two tracks will not be more than 5 to 6 meter. And because of the space constraint, it has to be as close as possible. So in that case, we have to go with a method which is not allow the existing railway track to settle. So we have chosen the stone column. Where the DFCC track is going in a detour area where there is no Indian railway line, we have chosen preloading with PVD drains. That is sand drains or a big drain. So we have handled around 80,000 numbers of stone columns of length varying from 5 to 15 meter and 4 lakh meters of numbers of PVDs varying from 8 to 15 meter. So how we did this design of the stone column? The entire process is split into four types, four processes. One is getting the subsoil profile from the field investigation and laboratory testing. Then doing the design procedure for the stone columns, layout based on the loading that is coming from the railway track. And then next is the construction procedures and confirmatory testing, whether whatever design and execution done is performing as per the requirement. So basically soft clay, we know that what is the properties required is the cohesiveness, cohesive soil, C value of the soil, cohesion of the soil. Then when shear test gives the cohesion directly in soft clays, and also we can get the C value from the N value. So as per the requirements of the bid and tender requirement, we need to do every 250 meter one borehole or at every structure location. So we have done so much of investigations, almost for every kilometer 4 numbers, around 400 to 500 boreholes and 50 numbers of vane shear tests were conducted. And the entire data is plotted horizontally based on the chain age. So these are the borehole information, use the N values, clay content, soil pressure, liquidity index, dry density, etc. You can see that the color which is circled is the soft clay patches along the entire 100-kilometer stretch. So the improvement is required only in these three areas where the soft clay layer is more than 2 meter and N values are very less and the C values are less than 2 kilopascals. 20 kilopascals. Okay. So you can see the color on top of it. The green line is the investigation bottom and the boreholes are shown in red color. So this is the way we plot entire stretch of 100 kilometers and identify which area requires treatment. Yeah, it's just taking some time. Okay, these are the boreholes plotted for just information purpose. What is the N value and how are the C values changes, and in situ shear test results also shown here. It is varying 12 kilopascal to 15, so which definitely can't carry the load from the embankment. So since the entire stretch is 100 kilometers and to arrive the areas precisely where the treatment is required based on the loading coming from the embankment, the ground profile, properties of the soil, we have made a flow chart for the soft ground treatment. So when we should go for a replacement, when we should go for a stone column, when we should go for a PVDs. So this flow chart gives for a designers to choose the type of treatment required based on the above said parameters. Okay. So the entire design procedures are based on the RDSO guidelines GE G5, also IS code 15284. This is the stone column. Entire design procedure and guidelines are given in this code. RDSO also gives the guidelines based on this code and some of the information taken from the overseas codes. So this is the typical embankment for any railway loading. That 13.86 is the minimum width is required for the two tracks going parallel. Below that rail track, we go for a ballast, below the ballast blanket, then subgrade, SQ1, SQ2, what we call, then the embankment material. So the top thickness will be varying from 1.6 meter will be the blanket and the subgrade. Above that, there will be rail height, some 350 to 400 mm. So the entire loading calculated from the live load from the track, ballast, blanket and subgrade load, it comes around 56.4 kilopascals for a 2.5 meter height of embankment. So if the soil is able to take this load, there will be no treatment required. If this cohesive values are not, or shear strength parameters are not supporting this load, we are going for the treatment. So this is the typical embankment sketch with the stone column, spacing and depth, and blanket layer is for getting any pore water that comes on the top. It acts like a drainage layer to drain out the water. So most of you know that how the stone column will take the load. It basically takes the resistance offered by the surrounding soil for the bulging. Then the capacitive stone column results from the resistance offered by the surrounding soil due to the surcharge. These are all basic principles of the stone column, how it takes the load. So based on these three criteria, we arrive the diameter of the stone column, spacing and pattern. Is it a triangular or a square pattern based on the load that is coming? So how we did the design process is we have chosen 900 mm dia stone column, final diameter. Depth of the stone column varies 5 to 15 meter based on the soft clay layer thickness, and we choose the triangular pattern because of the loading is high, so we need to go with a closer spacing. So minimum spacing is 3D. It may go up to 2.4 meter. We have gone wherever loading is not much and strength of the clay is more. And bearing capacity improvement achieved is 60 kPa to 220 kPa. So when we do this design, we need to perform the slope stability of the embankment for the live load and the dead load coming from the embankment material. If we don't treat the ground, what is the result of the deformation or a settlement? You can see that green patch of it, which is having a very high deformations with a factor of safety is less than 0.838 because the shear strength of the clay is not enough to support the embankment load laterally or passive resistance. So once we treat with the stone column, this factor of safety has improved to 1.916 and there is no failure. The slope stability is achieved. So as the stone columns has to be done very close to the existing railway track where every 10 or 15 minutes one train moves on the track, and also the vibration of the equipment what we are using while doing the ground stone column inside the ground, it should not disturb the existing railway embankment. So we have chosen a method which was taken from New Zealand, Macmillan patented technology, that vibrationless stone columns. It is brought by Sarita Infra into the India. They are the certificate holders. So we have used their services to do this job. So what is this method? Actually, the stone will be fed at the bottom of the hole, and the torque that is required to push the stone to the laterally, thereby you can make a stiffer column. And this advantage in this system is it will laterally compact and also vertically compact the stone for the enlargement of the stone column. So this is the installation procedure. I will just show the video after the 3 slides. You get a full picture about the installation process. So this machine, what is the here? The machine will make a hole into the ground by rotation, and for while rotating, the amount of force required for the equipment to go inside, that called a torque. The torque maximum, more torque required if the ground resistance is more. So once we reach the bottom of the ground with the pushing this Kelly bar, then aggregate will be fed through the Kelly inside, which will be fed at the bottom. Then there is the lateral pushing with the torque and also vertical compaction. Then the Kelly is retrieved back so that the column is formed in the ground. So what is the volume? We make 500 to 550 dia column, which is enlarged up to 900 mm. So that much of force required to laterally push the clay with the stones and then compact it finally to a finished diameter of 900 mm. So we can see this how the stone column equipment is pushed inside, making the hole in the ground. Then after completing up to the bottom, the material is fed on the top of the hopper, which will go through that black pipe to the bottom. And this entire equipment has a system to rotate horizontally to push it laterally, and also vertically it will give with the vibration, so that it will compact both laterally and vertically. And we can see the finished column after the completion. Yeah, you can play the video, Pranav. Yeah, you have seen this entire procedure, how the torque is applied and how it is measured on the screen or monitored on the screen, and volume of the stone that is pushed inside, and then it is recorded for every stone column and then measured it. So once we make the entire layout of the stone columns, how the performance of the stone column is measured by a confirmatory load test. So two types of load tests we conduct. One is on the stone column, on the group of the stone columns. One on a single stone column and a 3-column group. It will be loaded up to 1.5 times the design load as per the IS code 15284, and the settlements as per the given in 10 to 12 mm per single column, 25 to 30 for 3-column test. Okay. So this is like a similar to a pile load test where we apply a cartilage and measure as per the procedure. 10% of the load is applied and the settlements are measured and the load settlement graph is plotted. So this is the single column test is directly done on one column, that is a red hatched lines. The other one is we do the loading on 3 columns. So based on the 3 column, it is applied is 960 kilonewton. If it is single column, it is 320, and the measured settlements are as follows: 6 mm and net settlement is 4 mm. For a group, it is 13 mm and 7.12. So these are the load settlement curves plotted and based on the as per the requirements to get the safe load on the columns. Okay. These tests are as similar to the pile what we do that. Okay. So ultimate bearing capacity of improved ground is worked out to be 40 based on this load test, which is equal or more than the what required from the embankment loading. So this is the DFCCI MDS we inspected during the site visit, and he has seen it. Each column takes around 10 to 15 minutes to complete the boring, then half an hour to do the stone pushing inside and compaction. So some of the site photographs, whichever you have seen in the video, you would have observed that we are working very close to the existing railway track and how fast it is pushing the mandrel inside. Okay, and that is called a telescopic load feeding the material. That's a special equipment which will expand and supply the material at the heights. So the next one, what we have used here in the same project is the PVDs. Wherever the embankment or the railway line is going in detour or away from the IR, Indian Railway lines, we have gone with the preloading of PVDs. So first we do the PVDs, then we do the preloading to achieve the consolidation and the settlement so that embankment loads can be applied directly. So PVDs are used in detour stretches and this is as per 15284 code of part 2. Allowable settlements after construction limited to 100 mm as per the allowable limits. Preloading time and height is the most crucial calculations to be made by the geotechnical engineers in this process. How much time required to achieve the consolidation in the soft clay based on the drain property and the preloading. That is a challenge, and that has to be monitored at the site based for the whether we are able to get the same results what is predicted theoretically. So what we have used a tech drain 100 mm by 4 mm wick. Thickness of clay layer is 8 to 12 triangular pattern and the spacing is 0.9 meter. So preloading that depends on the height of the embankment, it will be calculated and given. The preload duration also is restricted to 3 to 4 months. You can see the process of wick drain installation. The machine will have a mandrel and the drain will, along with the mandrel, is pushed inside. Then the drain will be left inside, but then the mandrel is withdrawn. Then the drain is cut and the wick drain is installed in the ground. So the machine name is called drain stitcher, and the process will be done. You can see a typical 3D picture of the railway embankment with the wagon and this PVD drains inside with a drainage layer and embankment. There is equipment used for the installation of the PVD drains. You can see how the big drains after installation, you can see that. Then the preloading material is being brought in. So this is the installation processes, make the ground clean and remove any debris. Then place SQ1, what we call as a granular material for the embankment, 0.3 to 0.5 meter to make a flat form. For the movement of the equipment, if we don't put this layer, the clay layer has a tendency to shear off and the equipment cannot move freely. So we need to bring this material which will take the load of the equipment. So this is the base width of the embankment, and based on the embankment width, the weak drain spacing and this extent of the thing will be done, reloading time. So preloading are done in stages based on the clay strength is achieved based on the consolidation time period and the percentage of consolidation. After consolidation settlements are over, we start putting the blanket and then the final track. So monitoring of the field monitoring is very important in case of the PVD drains. Whereas stone column, it is not required. It is totally modified the shear strength parameter by pushing a material into the ground. Whereas here we are only just putting a drainage material inside the clay. By preloading, we are removing the water from soft clay. Thereby, we are speeding up the consolidation, increasing the shear strength. So field monitoring is very important. Generally, we do two types of testing. One is piezometer to monitor the pore water pressure. Second one is the settlement gauges and recorders to see how much real ground settlement that has taken place. So we have used Casagrande type piezometers. So this is a typical cross section which you all would have studied. So this is the standpipe, PVC standpipe, and then put piezometer inside and see the water level variation every time. We have used around 4 numbers each at 5,000 square meter area. Settlement is 10 numbers we have provided at 2,000 square meter area. So the settlement is a plate type of settlement recorder, and the monitoring frequency is weekly, sometimes every day when the loading is in progress. Where there is a process and procedure is laid out to monitor these settlements. So this is regarding the ground improvement method. Two methods which we discussed. One is stone columns, other one is the PVD drains. So same clay, when there is an expansive property is there in the clay because of the montmorillonite mineral that is present in the clay, when it is come in contact with the water, it expands. Thereby, it will give a cracks to the ground. So how we have to handle if the embankment is passing through the expansive soils? What type of treatment we need to give and how to handle this one? We have this problem encountered in Baroda area, where most of the land where the railway line is passing is of high expansive soil nature. So there are high plasticity where liquid limit is high. We know that we will get the expansive nature. Okay. So we can see that how initially the embankment subsequent to the rains, there will be expansiveness and the entire embankment gets swell one side and shrink other side. So thereby we get the cracks and there will be failures. So how we have identified the expansive soils. and what sort of treatments we have used in these areas. So we can see this majority of the areas are from Surat to Baroda. Most of these areas there is fields which is high expensive soils. So how we have to identify an expansive soil? The swelling pressure is more than 0.5 kg per centimeter square. Clay content is more than 25%, and differential free swell index is more than 30%. So these are the three parameters we should study before arriving at the treatment requirement. So once the differential free swell is more than 50%, it is very high degree of expansion. So once, as per the requirement here for the railway embankment design, if differential free swell is greater than 30, we need to replace that earth with the CNS material. So similar, this is also 130 kilometer track length, where we have done the boreholes at every 250 meter and identified the potential areas where the expansive soils are available. So based on the three criteria shown in the earlier slide, the entire stretch is classified into different areas of treatment processes based on the expansive nature. Same thing. So there are two methods are available in India now, two or three methods. One is, if we don't want to do any treatment, better to replace the entire expansive clay thick layer in the ground and make bring a new soil and fill it there and compact back. Or giving the lime treatment is also one of the possible method. And the next important method, which in India we are using it everywhere, wherever expansive soils for irrigation channels or the canals, we are using a CNS layer that is called cohesive non-swelling soil. This is developed earlier long back by Professor Katti with his vast experience in the CNS, this expansive soil study. So we have used most of the places CNS layer or the replacement method. Lime treatment was not used even though it is possible because the cost of the treatment is very high. So this is the process we have followed in our design. One is if expansive soil is less than 2 meter, it is cheaper to excavate 2 meter and replace with the SQ1 material or granular material. If the expansive soil layer is more than 2 meter and swell pressure is more than embankment weight, because if the downward weight is more than the upward weight of the due to swelling pressure, then nothing will happen to the embankment. So only ends we need to treat the soil so that there will not be any moisture variation. So that is the third point what I explained. Expansive soil is greater than 2 meter, swell pressure is less than embankment height, only we treat at the ends. So what is the thickness of CNS layer is required based on the swell pressure of the soil. There is enough literature is available, that is based on 50 kPa to 150, we can go up to 75 centimeter thickness and 8500 mm based on the swell pressure variation. So these are the properties of CNS layer which is available in all literature, and we have followed as per this IS codes and the CNS properties. So we have made a complete replacement of expansive soil if it is less than 2 meter. If the depth of excavation is less than 2 meter clay thickness, we have excavated 2 meter and replaced with the granular material and compacted back up to 97% MDD at OMC. So if expansive, if swell pressure is more than the downward weight of the embankment, we have replaced the top layer based on the swell pressure. 75 centimeter of soil we have made with CNS. You can see the hatched portion is called the CNS layer. so that there will not be any further movement of expansion through that layer and then disturb the embankment. So the third method is if the downward weight of the embankment is more than the expansive swell pressure of the soil below, we have only treated at the ends of the embankment. Our embankment width is some places even 40 to 50 meter based on the height. So only at the ends we have made CNS layer so that the moisture variation will not affect the sloped portion where the downward load is not much. Where existing IR and DFCCA lines are moving, how the treatment is done. Yeah, this is end of my presentation on the 3 case studies, 2 case studies, 2 project case studies with the 3 improvement what we have made in our projects. I can take some of the questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for sparing your time. So now I will go to the Q&A session. So here we have some of the couple of questions. So one question by Mr. Avikumar Mandal. What was the railway embankment fill material used there in the project and its bulk unit weight? Was there any use of typical lightweight fill materials like pond or fly ash with adequate shear resistance to reduce the extent of applied dead loads or stress over the ground?
Yeah, very good question he has asked. We are using a granular material of density varies from 1.8 to 2 based on the local availability of the material. There is a percentage of silt and clay percentage and sand required for SQ1, SQ2. It's basically a granular material, correct? So we can also use the fly ash, which we are trying in one of our projects, pond ash. So when we use the lot of literature is available for usage of pond ash for the embankments, both road and railway embankment. So the density is 1.1 to 1.2. So when we want to use the pond ash, after compacting the layers, we have to fill with a minimum 1.5 meter cover of the soil. So the fly ash embankment cannot be exposed directly. It should be covered with 1.5 meter of soil cover. So it is possible to use the pond ash for the railway embankments.
Okay, I hope sir has answered your question. Next question by Maipadi Vamsi Narayan Krishna on what area replacement ratio maintained in stone columns and how you have chosen triangular pattern.
So this based on the shear strength of the clay and the improvement is required. There is a calculations you have to make it, okay? Accordingly, we have decided the spacing, triangular pattern.
Okay, sir. So the first person has again asked one more question. What was the minimum required factor of safety considered for slope stability analysis of the railway embankment under static and seismic conditions?
Maybe I'll ask Ishwar Prasad to answer this one. I think it is a normal
1.6 static case. Seismic case 1.2.
1.6 and 1.2.
Yes, sir.
1.6 and 1.2, sir?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so the question was answered, I hope. Next, another important question. Mr. Kumar from IITM. Sir, it was a nice presentation. Generally, it was very difficult to get exact proportion of CNS material, what Professor Katti has given. So what kind of tests were done on CNS material to make it suitable for replacement?
So basically, the CNS material is only the sieve analysis and the proportionate of the material mixing, correct? A typical CNS material is nothing but a red muram is a CNS material. So we have find out some of the quarries in Baroda where directly CNS type of material is available. It is a natural material where the proportionate of the different constituents of the soil, that silt and clay and sand percentages. So we test at the laboratory and arrive at that CNS material and what is the swelling properties of the soils and its C value and phi value. But very difficult to get the CNS material naturally at the sites. But fortunately, we got some quarries nearby. Red Muram is a good CNS material.
Okay, sir. Some more questions are there. Sir, how will the pressure or compression take place on the aggregate loaded into the borehole? This question is raised by Rajan Peter.
See, that's very good. See, basically the material we have make only to get the 900 diameter stone column finished one. We are doing only 500 to 550 dia hole in the ground first. Then we are filling the material, the aggregate through the mandrel to the bottom, and then we apply a lateral torque, that is, it is rotating. While rotation, it is applying a lateral pressure that is called torque. Push the clay outward. Also, that is means once it expands 550 to 900 and the volume of the material is measured to the entire borehole volume. So that much torque we apply through the machine, and also vertical compaction is applied through the weight of the mandrel. So that is monitored at the screen. What is the torque applied and what is the material consumed?
Okay.
You can see on the screen of the equipment physically there.
Yeah, I think you have shown in that video like that, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, some more questions. Some two questions
Yes.
I'll take. Mr. Akshay Mehre has asked, is it any limitation for sand drain instead of stone column or difficult to achieve shear strength 60 kilopascal?
Sorry, repeat that question.
Sir, is it any limitation for sand drain instead of stone column or difficult to achieve shear strength 60 kPa?
See, the sand drain will not improve the shear strength until you apply a preloading on top of it. Correct? The drain is only a conduit to take the water from the ground to the top. Suppose if I need 50 kilopascal shear strength in the clay, so I need to apply an extent of preload on top of it to achieve the shear strength. As per the consolidation formula, the time required to reach the percentage of 90%, based on that only the clay is improving its strength. So preloading, extent of preloading is linked with the shear strength gain required. So there are the calculations to arrive at the preloading weight required versus the shear strength gain and the spacing of the wig drains or PVDs.
Sir, one more question is there. In the equipment used in the first case study, you said the diameter of auger was 500 to 600 meter. How did you achieve? Yeah. How did you achieve the final design diameter of 900 millimeter? What mechanism in the use auger made it expand below the ground? Please explain.
We have already answered the question. Correct. Based on the torque, the volume of the expanded volume of the stone column and the volume of the stone consumed is the measurement of the achieving the torque. What I said, no, how much torque required to be applied. Suppose you take a loose sand and start filling the inside, make a hole and start filling the aggregate. Correct. So how much you compact it from the top, it will start laterally expanding. Correct. So that depends on the rotational resistance of the soil and how much of torque you are applying through the equipment.
think most of very important questions and answer.
You can take some more questions if still
Yeah.
time is there. Otherwise,
Yes, sir. How was the, okay, that question has been answered. Participants can still keep on posting. Some few more minutes are there if you have any queries.
if time is there, we can show other videos also. I don't know.
Okay.
One question from Professor Uma Shankar: was the use of
Yeah.
geosynthetics explored in the project, grids to geocells in granular fill over soft soil?
We have not explored it because the thickness of the soft clay is varying from 6 to 12 meter. Maybe the geotextiles will, geosynthetics will improve the ground immediately at the immediate shear strength will improve at the top layers. But long-term settlements, how to measure in case of railway embankment is the question mark. That is the reason I think it was not allowed in our bidding. We are not studied.
Railways are very stringent. They are not allowed us to use geosynthesis in this project.
But we are trying to use the geotextiles or geo grids to replace the blanket material, which is very expensive material. To reduce the thickness, we are exploring to use of the geo grids in our projects. But still, approvals and other things from the railways is very difficult.
Okay, sir. Okay. Next question is by Steny Stefani. Have you ever used jet grouting columns to stabilize the railway embankment?
No, no.
Okay. And
But,
a few more questions. Yes, sir.
About the jet grouting, it is quite expensive, and generally jet groutings are not possible to use in this wider area.
Okay.
It's my preliminary opinion. Okay.
Okay, sir. And one more question I'll take. Was there in actual post-treatment measurement of improvement in shear strength due to the PVD action under preloading? How was it in comparison with design anticipation?
See, the two checks what we have made is the pore water pressure and the settlement gauges. So when the consolidation settlements, when we measure theoretically, we check actual settlement day wise and week wise and month wise, and we have compared the behavior of the actual and with theoretical more or less coming with a 5 to 6% variation. So it is exactly matches as per the design required. Yes.
Okay, sir. I think we can conclude the session. Thank you, sir, for sparing your valuable time and giving us a wonderful lecture. Thank you, Raju, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Next slide. Next, we go on to the second session, which is a professional development session, which you might be waiting to see the session. So the session is on the mentorship with intention and purpose. The session is handled by Ms. Srilakshmi Nagarajan, General Manager, Engineering and Business Development, Gaiken America Co. So I'll say, Ma'am Lucky Nagarajan, in her present role, is in charge of managing the staff, leading or mentoring engineering and business development teams in USA, Canada, and South America. Before joining Gaiken America, she has built about 15 years of geotechnical experience in design construction, project management, and business development. She is also the chair of DFI Women in Deep Foundations. She has recently launched Women in DFI group and has been encouraging various fellow women engineers to come together to discuss industry-related issues and support each other. I'm happy to invite you, ma'am, to this wonderful session.
Thank you very much, Roji. It was a very kind introduction. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to present on a topic that is very dear to my heart: mentoring with intention and purpose. So let's see what it means to each of us. Okay, so a quick overview of what is going to be covered today. Let's briefly talk about what is mentoring. Then let's see what are the different types of mentoring and how many mentors do you need actually. That is a very important discussion to have. And I would like to bring in some of the mentoring programs around the world to show what it has been in different parts of the world, how mentoring has been chosen into programs to improve success. And we will see what the takeaways from today's presentation. So I would like to post this poll question to you all. What is mentoring to you? Is it a learning relationship, long-term career development, personal growth, skill building, or something else? Please choose which one is more important to you. Just a few seconds more and we will have the results. So let's see the results. Wow. Learning relationship was 19%, long-term career development was 25%, personal growth and skill building was 54%. I would not have argued with that. So let's go to next discussion on this. Pranav, can you give me the control or you can go to the next slide? There, perfect. Okay, so where does mentor come from? In Sanskrit, we say Gurubhyo Namaha, right? Salutations to the teacher. So mentor basically means teacher, helping, advising, right? It can be a less experienced person or a younger person, right? Or the relationship between less experienced and a younger person. Word mentor actually comes from Greek. In the Odyssey, was the son of Alcimus. In his old age, Mentor was a trusted friend of Odysseus. When Odysseus actually left for the Trojan War, he placed Mentor and Eumaeus in charge of his son Telemachus. So Mentor prepared his son for family responsibility. So when I think of mentors, mythological Hindu stories come to my mind. If we think of Guru Vasishta, if we think of Maharshi Valmiki and Dronacharya, they all were great mentors that led to a big history, right? And Guru Vasishta also said, look at what is distant, not what is near at hand. How true is this, right? These stories are still relevant in today's world. Don't you think so? So now let's see. Sorry. Pranav, can you go back to slide number 6? Sorry about that. One more slide, please. One more slide. Yes, perfect. Thank you. So when you are thinking about mentoring, how does mentoring support us? In career, mentoring provides coaching, visibility, giving visibility that you need, and also helps with challenges and learning technical skills. And psychologically provides encouragement in our steps to succeed. Acceptance and confirmation of the right path is very important to us. Mentors who are role models can be very effective and inspiring. We all know that. Their values are a great way to motivate the prodigies. So if you are a prodigy, mentoring can give you professional identity, expose you to diverse career options. Of course, who does not like higher work satisfaction? For a mentor, it is a recognition and visibility in the industry. I strongly believe giving back to the community. By being a mentor, you're doing meaningful work and inspiring others. To an organization, mentor means retaining talent, creating diversity, and increasing performance. So now let's see what are the different types of mentors in the in the industry. So traditionally, mentorship has been as formal relationship between an experienced and less experienced person. Has always been a hierarchical and one-on-one relationship. This is something we all know. So traditional mentors have seen to be contributing to prodigies' development. You also have mentors who lead by example, as we just saw, role models and who can actually inspire you. Peer mentors or someone from the workplace, a colleague or a confidant. We see more about them in the next few slides. Reverse mentoring is very important and has become a big role in the improvement and the advancement of the companies. So the age-old practice is changing and being influenced by forms of work, technology, workforce, diversity, and inclusive environments, and thinking outside the box. 30 years of empirical research has suggested changing thoughts on mentoring, if you say. Murphy and Cram 2018 published some of the key findings from this empirical research. So it has been seen that informal relationships are being more effective. Organic growth of the relationship between mentor and protege has been a lot more beneficial. This has benefited mutual learning and also growth for the mentor and also for the protege. So we used to have single influential pivotal mentors, right? They have become a lot more rare now. And now we have network of mentors who help us grow in every angle that we would like to. So now let's see how many mentors are actually enough. Is it 1, 2, 5, or do we need more? Let's see the answer. Oh, wow. 1, 47%, 2, 28%, 5, 2%, more 24%. I couldn't agree more, right? Let's see. Let's learn a little bit about this. Okay, so Anthony Tian, in his book, Good People, explains that it is important to have at least 5 mentors in your life. So recently, I also attended a presentation on mentorship, and in that, the presenter actually said we need 7 mentors, at least 7 mentors who come from different backgrounds, different cultures, different countries, and inspire you differently. So these mentors actually can help us define and express our inner calling, because it is rare that one person can give you everything that you need. Don't you think so? So who are the 5 mentors that we need in our life to succeed? Mentor number 1 is the master of the craft. I will say your personal Jedi master. This person is someone who has built their wisdom through the years of experience and who can provide insight into your industry to fine tune your skills. They help you identify, realize, and hone your strengths towards the state of perfection as possible. So the second mentor is the champion of your cause. These are the people who are advocates and always have your back. They are not just the boosters, but also will connect you with useful people in the industry. Very important to always have. And the third one is a co-pilot. They are the best work buddies. Who wouldn't want a best work buddy, right? So this is someone who bounce ideas with. You support each other, you hold each other accountable. That is how you both can grow together. So the number 4 mentor is called as the anchor. This person actually is your confidant and a sounding board. They're not actually in your office, can be in the industry or a family member. This person will always help you set priorities, achieve work-life balance, and not lose of your values. So the number 5 mentor is a reverse mentor. We just briefly talked about reverse mentor. Reverse mentor is someone who is not more experienced than you, but less experienced, more younger person. So this is very important mentor as others. This person will always help you learn the culture gaps, culture changes. We all know as we are growing our industry, growing ourselves, there is that one part of the generation which is growing in terms of technology, growing in terms of culture, right? We need to learn that from them. And this is someone who will actually help your company and give you the understanding of how to retain the younger staff by learning their ways. When we think about these 5 mentors over a period of time, I definitely can say each one of these mentors are in my life, guiding me, helping me, and inspiring me. They're all around you. You just have to look for them. So now I would like to know something from you. Are you part of a mentoring program within your company, in the industry, or you're not part of any mentoring programs? Please take the survey. And once you do that, I would like you to put in your comments in the chat box. Basically, I would like to know if you're part of the mentoring program, what kind of program? If you're part of the mentoring program in industry, what kind of program that is? Oh, wow. Within the company, 26%, and in the industry, 9%. I would definitely would like to know what are the different mentoring programs that you are within the company and in the industry. Please note them in the chat box. And I see there are a lot of people who are not part of any mentoring program. I would definitely encourage you. So to bring you some information on mentoring programs, I would like to discuss some programs that I have been exposed to around the world. Okay, so many engineering and construction technical associations around the world have implemented successful and mentoring programs. In the last decades, these programs have actually evolved to empower our communities, influence our members, to raise awareness within younger minds through STEM programs or STEAM programs. So one such program in USA is Women in Transportation mentoring program. This program actually reflects commitment to professional development of mentors and prodigies in transportation industry. It is a one-year program, and typically 10 pairs of mentors and prodigies are part of this. Mentors come from transportation industry and also mostly strong leadership skills. We don't have that many women in the leadership positions. So end of the year, a graduation of the prodigies are also celebrated with a presentation on their journey. How cool is that? And this is a very structured program. In UK, other part of the world, BAME, BAE, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities have a cross-organizational mentoring program. So the mentors come from different parts of the world, different backgrounds. I was just mentioning that you may need about 7 or 5 mentors who are from different backgrounds, different cultures, and different countries. So this is one of those programs. And this has been very widely successful. This actually maximizes your potential and support of progression in your industry. So there is another program in Brazil, which is called as Elas Projectam, a community. It is a community for professional development in Brazil, and it is a very unique program. This is a company that is aiming to empower women and also help in social transformation. Mentors actually have helped women around the country in Brazil, and they travel around the country actually choosing women whom they will like to mentor, right soft skills, and also tackle any gaps and obstacles. Company has been actually instrumental in organizing a program called 100 Women in 100 Days Challenge. So next, let's come to Deep Foundation Institute Women in Deep Foundations Committee. So they are getting ready to launch a pilot mentoring program with their members specifically. This group is focusing on developing organic relationships with mentors and prodigies. This is a little different program than all the other ones. They're all structured, but here we are trying to do it something non-structural. And the reason for doing that is we are creating this mentoring pods where the mentoring pods is about 5 to 6 or 7 people, and each prodigy is given a chance to choose more than one mentor coming from different background, ethnic background, different industry background, and also learning leadership skills from different mentors. And this program, pilot program, will be launched during the DFI conference this year in Las Vegas. So we're very proud of this, and we're looking forward to seeing how we can grow this organically within the group members. So let's see what are the takeaways of this presentation today. So mentoring model, is a two-way street. You should always remember that. It is not one size fits it all. So mentoring has proven to be the core component for professional and personal development, right? So take time to develop genuine connections with those you admire, and also assist them as you grow together, right? And try to learn from everyone you meet. I always believe that there is always something that you can learn from everyone you meet in your life. One thing I would suggest is always important to be visible, okay? And definitely celebrate your success. Always talk about your success, say how you achieved them and how your mentor helped you achieve that, okay? And before we leave today, I would like to leave you with this quote. The cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. How true. Whether your role is as a mentor or a prodigy, take a brave step to find your treasure. That is so true to every one of us. This is a quote from Joseph Campbell. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, DFI of India, organizers, and introducing me, Roji. So here is my email and there is my LinkedIn. Please send me any questions you have or any comments you have. I would be happy to share them with you. Thank you, Roji. I can't hear you, Roji.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your. Thank you, ma'am, for being here, and especially spending your valuable time for giving us the session. And we have some questions from the participants.
Sure.
I'll raise those questions. So, first question by Rajan Peter. You have been actively involved in a mentoring women geotechnical engineering to come forward and take active participation. How is the outcome?
My favorite person actually from the industry. Rajan, it's really nice to see you attending this and also asking me a question. I think it has been very satisfying, Rajan. So 6 years ago, I had no mentors. I did have mentors, but not strong mentors who would inspire me. So, and most of my mentors have been women. It is very hard for a lot of women to say that. But being part of Women in Deep Foundations, I have seen how it can be a man or a woman, does not matter. How you can lay a strong foundation for someone who looks up to you, who wants to be like you. So that's what I've gotten from a lot of women who are part of this committee. And we see progression or a movement going towards enriching and empowering other women who want to cherish and love geotechnical industry. Women in Deep Foundations actually has many programs like that. They have grants. They also have many scholarships. So I would highly recommend who is on this call to go to the DFI USA website and technical committees, and there is Educational Trust Fund page and also Women in Deep Foundations page. Please go to that and check the scholarships and the grants that you can apply to, and it's really valuable. That's what I would suggest. I hope I answered your question, Rajan.
So, can you also talk about, like, from my part, like, I wanted to ask you, like, can you talk about much about that DFI India women?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
how can
definitely.
you
So
part of and all?
yeah, so DFI of USA Women in Deep Foundations Committee was established 8 years ago. Mary Ellen Large, who everyone in DFI of India know, is the strongest pillar of that. And over a period of time, they have set up so many programs and so many initiatives and events, which actually works towards showing the career opportunities for women and also showing the skill set, how they have to develop, you know. And it is comprised of both men and women. Again, I'm saying men and women because without men, I don't think we can make this change. And we have monthly meetings on every third Thursday. Sorry, monthly meetings, yes, third Thursday. And this is something everyone is, invited. If you're in India, it is 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. EST. Eastern time zone. So I think it is still like, in the evening, late evening. So you all can attend. And if you wish to be part of it, please send us an email. DFI of India, DFI. If you go to technical committees, there is Women in Deep Foundations page and you can send us an email. And the second thing is the same thing we wanted to replicate in India to also help Indian women get into geotechnical engineering or civil engineering and also to retain them. So if you're interested to become that part, we have a WhatsApp group and we successfully launched 3 webinar series. This was Connect and Grow Civil Engineering Careers. It was a very successful program. So we are coming back in November for our webinar number 4. Showing the opportunities to grow in civil engineering. So if you're interested to be part of this WhatsApp group and also part of this Indian group, please send an email to activities@dfi.org to Pranav, and then we will get you in right away. And I'm promising you, like, there are amazing women in this group who will help you find your common ground in the industry.
Thank you, ma'am.
Roji, I will be looking forward to getting you on that WhatsApp group.
Sure, ma'am. I'll be interested to join. Next few questions from Dr. V. Balakumar. How
Okay.
to create a HR department who can design such program?
Say that
Understanding
again,
the psycho. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. How to create a HR department who can design such program? Understanding the psychology of the attendees are essential. How to study this? This is a question raised by Dr. V. Balakumar.
Dr. Balakumar, that is a very good question. I would like to talk to you personally about this. The reason I'm talking to you about personally is because in USA, after Women in Deep Foundations Committee started, there has been companies that have actually launched women groups within their companies. So the examples are Keller. Keller Group has a big women group, KWIC, they call it as Keller Women in Construction, and Langen Women's Group is also very, very, very big, and they have amazing initiatives. So one of the things, there are few other companies that have come up with this. I'm just giving you these two examples because of the time limit. I would like to share on the journey they took, how they wrote the proposal, how that proposal was submitted to the board of directors, and how the program was launched within the companies and what are the events they organize within the company. So it all takes to 2 or 3 people or 2 or 3 employees within the company. It can be a man or a woman or together who see the need for having this program within the company and bring in everyone else who are interested to figure out what is more important to discuss within the company. What are the different questions that are on the minds? It may be skill development. It may be rights for women and men. Like, I'm not saying that only women are treated, inappropriately in the offices. Men are also, if you think about it. So writing those rights up, fighting for those rights, that is also another thing. And also, coming up with technical direction within the company and the employees who are part of that program to help them grow. So there are many things that you can do. If you don't mind, please send an email to Pranav, or you can send an email to me. Let's talk about this. I can show you what other companies have done in USA. And Keller has done a wonderful job, and then we can see how that can be implemented in your HR level.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. And yeah, and some questions, it's not clear. As an education teacher, I'm mentoring to students in a small level. Some question. Rajeshwaran T. So
That is
that's
wonderful.
what.
That is wonderful. Congratulations. And it is a big task. Not easy to mentor someone. So having that continuous dialogue between the mentor and prodigy, again, as I said, it's a two-way street. You will get how much you give. So that has to be understood on both levels. So congratulations, and that is very important. Good luck. And let us know if there is anything as DFI of India, if we can help, please let us know.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, I would also like to ask a question like how mentorship is important to our country and compared to the other countries. Like, what is the difference? Like how in India and maybe in the universities or the organizations.
Yeah. So I think, so of course, I did my bachelor's in India and then moved out of the country to do my master's in USA, right? At that time, I don't think mentoring was that visible, that evident. You had silent mentors. You never realized they were your influencers. That's what I would like to say. But I think over a period of time, the whole world has realized the importance of mentoring. Okay, importance of networking. Since we only had 20 minutes today, I did not go deep into networking. Mentoring and networking actually goes hand in hand if you think about it. So the importance of that has been definitely measured and seen all over the world. I think in India, it is still in infancy stages. The companies itself, I think, has a very difficult time understanding how important it is for mentoring their employees, because, again, as I said, retaining employees is very important, right? In civil engineering, that is the biggest problem. That is the biggest problem, because when you see, like in my class, we had about 54 students in bachelor's. Out of that, you won't believe me, it was 26 women and 25 or 24 men. Out of that 26 women, only like 3 or 4 women stayed back in civil engineering, which is a very sad part. And the same thing with men. I'm not saying that civil engineering men, everyone goes into the workforce. There are a lot of people who get into computer science, whatever it is, other things. So mentoring is a big step that companies can take, and as a country, we can implement to retain all of them in the civil engineering industry. That's what I would say. I don't think there is a huge difference, because every country is working on this initiative, and India also has to work really strongly within the companies, technical associations, and even if you have a small group of classmates, you need to work on that. That's what I would suggest.
Thank you, ma'am. We have been receiving so many comments from the audience, like the session was very interesting and useful. Thank you, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time. And thank you.
Thank you very much, and feel free to reach out to me. I'm always available, and I'll always reply back. Thank you. Thank you, Pranav, Aniruddhan sir, and DFI of India. Thank you very much. Thank you, Roji.
Yes, sir. So I would like to thank all of your participants for attending this webinar. So I would also suggest you, if you want to become a student volunteer for DFI India, reach out to activities@dfiindia.org. Thank you, dear participants, and thank you, the speakers, for this wonderful webinar. See you all soon in the coming webinars. So here we wind up the session.